Hey guys, today we are going to talk about classifying quadrilaterals. So our learning targets are I can identify characteristics of quadrilaterals, I can classify shapes, and I can calculate the distance and slope in the coordinate plane to prove my classification. So we're not going to do a ton with classification right now. Basically, what we're worried about are the four general quadrilaterals: parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, and square. There are more, and there are other types of ways to classify them, but we're just going to worry about if the sides are congruent and if the diagonals are congruent. So in the case of a parallelogram, this is the most broad. The opposite sides are not congruent and the diagonals are not congruent. So that means to find out if something are congruent, we're going to use the distance formula. So that is, we're going to use the distance formula for all this that we just learned, okay? And then we're going to check and see if these are congruent. In a rectangle, the opposite sides are congruent and the diagonals are congruent. In a rhombus, the sides are congruent and the diagonals are not. And in a square, all four sides are congruent, all four sides are congruent, and the diagonals are congruent. So you've got to look at the difference. So the opposite sides are congruent here, but the diagonals are not, okay? Here, the opposites are congruent, the diagonals are, okay? Here, all four sides are congruent, but the diagonals are not. And here, all four sides are congruent and the diagonals are congruent. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to check, are the sides congruent, right? And if they are, we're going to have to check to see if the other set of sides are congruent. And then we're going to have to check to see if the diagonals are congruent. So we're going to have to do a lot of the distance formula, basically, is what we're doing here. So we'll be given four sets or four coordinates, and then we need to go from there. So what I usually do to start this is I kind of just make it's ugly. So this is not drawn to scale by any stretch of the imagination. So I start with 9, -4. So that's over here somewhere. So this is A. B is going to be 8, -2. So this is going to be here somewhere. Let's see. Oh, this is not going to be good. C is going to be 2, -5. So down here somewhere. And then D is going to be 3, -7. So this is going to be down here somewhere. Okay. So if I drew this kind of correctly, my sides are going to be like this, right? So my sides are going to be AB, BC, CD, and DA. And then my diagonals are going to be BD and AC. All right, so I'm just going to start and see what are congruent and what aren't. So I'm going to do AB first. And you're going to need to make sure you label your work, right? So remember, you're doing the distance formula is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, and then you're taking the square root, okay? So for AB, I'm going to do x is first, so 8 minus 9 squared plus -2 minus -4 squared. And then I'm going to take the square root. And I'm just going to put that straight in my calculator because otherwise I'm going to take up too much room writing all this out. So I'm going to do 8 minus 9 squared plus, and then -2 minus -4 squared. And I get square root of 5. And then I'm going to do BC. And so I'm going to do x's first, so 2 minus 8 squared plus -5 minus -2 squared. And that is going to give me 2 minus 8 squared. Oops, forgot a parentheses. 2 minus 8 squared plus negative 5 minus negative 2 squared. That's going to give me 3 square root of 5. All right, then I'm going to do CD. And that is going to do 3 minus 2 squared plus negative 7 minus negative 5 squared. And I'll put that in my handy dandy calculator. So I get 3 minus 2 squared plus negative 7 minus negative 5 squared. That's going to give me a square root of 5. So I have 2 equal sides so far. And then I'm going to do dA. So I'm going to say 3 minus 9 squared plus negative 7 minus negative 4 squared. And then that gives me 3 minus 9 squared plus negative 7 minus negative 4 squared. I get 3 square root of 5. All right, then I need to see if the diagonals, so that gives me 2 opposite sides, right? So AB, let's see, so AB was congruent to CD, right? And then AD was congruent to BC. All right, so that tells me the opposite sides are congruent. So that is either a parallelogram or it's a rectangle. Okay, so now I need to figure out are the diagonals congruent? So now I need to do a BD. So B and D. So I'm going to do 3 minus 8 squared plus negative 7 minus negative 2 squared. So 3 minus 8 squared plus negative 7 minus negative 2 squared. That gives me 5 square root of 2. And then my other diagonal is AC. And so that's going to do 2 minus 9 plus negative 5 minus negative 4. So 2 minus 9 plus negative 5 minus negative 4. And that is also 5 square root of 2. So my diagonals are equal or congruent. So that tells me that I have a rectangle. And that is how you do those. Just a lot of distance formula. So you'll get lots of practice. And that is all. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Make sure you keep that chart in front of you. And I will help you as much as I can.